Shavua Tov, Parashat Nitzavim Vayelech. There is something which we love in the study hall of the Talmud. But when this thing is done in our personal lives, it can cause great destruction of people and even of an entire land. But the antidote to this mystery danger is none other than the shofar, the pure sounds of the Tekiah, Shivarim, Teruah, Tekiah that we will hear on Rosh Hashanah in its full glory and that we already are hearing during the month of Elul. What am I talking about? Well, there are a couple of interesting things in this week's Parsha. One of them is a very famous poetic section where God says to the people that the commandments that I give you are not far from you. They're not in the heavens to say that somebody should go up, who should go up to the heavens and bring it down to us. And Rashi there says that means that if it were in the heavens, we'd be obligated to fly up there and get the Torah and bring it down. And it's obviously hyperbole, but it's kind of strange. Why should the Torah engage in such hyperbole, posing a theoretical that is completely impossible, that we should fly up to the heavens? What exactly is the point that the Torah is trying to make? Keep that question in mind. Let's go to an earlier section and raise another question there. Moses says to the people on behalf of God that today they are coming into the covenant with God, not just those that are standing there today, lo itchem levatchem, not just the people that are omeid hayom, standing here today, but even those that are not. In other words, all future generations. And many commentaries ask, how is that fair? That one generation can make an obligation to be in a covenant with God, which means to have an observance, a religion to observe, a body of commandments to obey. When they're not there, they can't say yes, they can't say no. How come that is fair? We have a rule, by the way, that a underaged child, a baby, the parents can convert the child, but it's conditional that when the child turns bar mitzvah, the child has to confirm that they indeed want to be Jewish. Otherwise, they revert to what they were born as, which was not Jewish. But on the other hand, a Jewish child has no such opt-out possibility. So how are we to understand that? How could one generation obligate all future generations? There are a couple of ways we can go about this. One is simply to say that it is very similar to the laws of inheritance. We have such a concept that the parents can leave their possessions to their children, grandchildren into perpetuity as long as those possessions continue to exist. So why shouldn't a covenant with God, a religious heritage, be any different than an inheritance? Now one could ask, though, an inheritance is, gold, silver, whatever. It's stuff that everybody wants. They might not all want this religion. Is this really to their benefit? And the answer to that is a resounding yes. A resounding yes. In other words, it is not just a benefit to them, it is the greatest possible benefit to any human being to have the Jewish faith. Not just because of the faith itself, and that's important too, because so many people today are wandering the world not knowing the meaning of life, not knowing where they're supposed to be and what they're supposed to be doing and what will bring them fulfillment. They wander in darkness. And we have the Torah, which gives us our perspectives, which help us. Obviously, everybody still needs to think about their life, but we have a perspective which guides us very true towards a fulfilled life. But it's even more than that. You see, the covenant, a brit, involves mutual ownership. When Abraham made a brit, a covenant with Hashem, it became a mutual ownership. My teacher, Rav Aaron Soloveitchik, stresses this point, that when we say in the prayers, the God of Abraham, it doesn't just mean the God that Abraham believes in, but it means the God that belongs to Abraham. Just as Abraham belongs to God. There is a mutual ownership here. Well, if that's the case, all the more so, because gold and silver could be a good thing, it could be a curse. There is, as King Solomon says, riches kept for a man's destruction. So there is definitely a mixed blessing when it comes to riches. But to have a relationship with God, to have a Torah which guides us true in life, there is no greater benefit than that. So certainly, if one can give to one's offspring their monetary value, which is a mixed blessing, certainly their spiritual heritage, and to give them God himself, as it were, what greater inheritance could there be? So that is one approach. But there's a more deeper approach. Excuse me. And that is that the people that are not there, they actually were there. What do I mean? I sound very contradictory. If they're not there, then they're not there. What do I mean they were there? For example, there's a beautiful website for Orthodox singles. It's called Saw You at Sinai. That's an interesting name. What does it come from? From the idea that all of the souls of the Jewish people into the future were present at the giving of the Torah at Mount Sinai. In other words, all of the souls of all of those future generations, they actually were there. And the Torah is very specific when it says that God made this covenant with those who are standing here today and with those who are not here today. The ones who are here today are standing, meaning physically they are standing here today. The ones who are not here are not physically standing here today, yet they are here today spiritually. And this means something very important in terms of the famous nature versus nurture debate. There's a whole discussion among psychologists and researchers. What forms the personality? Is it their genetics, their nature, or is it their nurture, their education, and their experiences? And they will never get the proper answer to this question because both of those positions assume that the spirit, the soul of the human being, is part of the human physical being. And therefore they search for it either in the DNA or in the accumulated experiences and education that the child received. But we say something else. There are three partners, according to the Jewish tradition, in the creation of a human being. They are the father and the mother who create the physical material. But then there is God who chooses and puts the soul, the neshama, which is hewn from beneath the divine throne of glory in heaven, into the body. And each neshama has its own unique personality, and that deals with and adapts to the DNA and the upbringing for sure. They are not insignificant. But the soul, that is the key driver of who each individual is. And all of those neshamot, all of those souls were indeed at Har Sinai, at Mount Sinai. And it's an important thing for us to remember that every human being has that spark of the divine within them. That's also important for us in our interpersonal relationships. When I see somebody who gets on my nerves, if I realize that, wait a second, they have a divine soul, and what I'm seeing is not the true them, so then I am much more willing and ready to take a deep breath and to forgive and to indeed have love for my fellow. So that's an important perspective. But let's take that a step further. The Baal HaAkedah says that the nature of the Jew changed at the moment when the Torah was given, at the moment when we were brought into that covenant. In other words, it became that not that we are giving it as an inheritance to somebody else who has to accept it from scratch. No, that's not the case at all. Rather, that it's built into our very existence, that we want to have this covenant, that we feel this covenant, that we want to observe the Torah and the mitzvot 100%. That is our natural state of being. There is a very famous law about divorce. A divorce, according to the Torah, has to be given willingly. The man cannot be forced to give a divorce. If somebody comes up to a man, holds a gun up to their head and says, give the divorce to your wife or I shoot, and he gives the divorce to the wife is not divorced because that divorce was coerced. It cannot be coerced. It has to be of his free will. Except in the case where the one doing the coercion is the Beit Din, is the rabbinical court. When the Beit Din decides that a person needs to give a divorce, they have the authority to physically to hit him, to have him given lashes until he says, I want to give the divorce. Even though you and I would say he's not saying I want to give the divorce, he's saying I want you to stop hitting me. But nonetheless, the Rambam says, when he says the words, I want to give the divorce, that is the true essence of the person speaking. Because the Jew is by nature fully desirous of observing the mitzvot completely. And when the Beit Din tells them to give a divorce, that is the mitzvah, to listen to the Chachamim, to observe the rule of the Beit Din. Some random person with a gun, no, but the Beit Din, yes. And it is our default state. And what happens is that sometimes we get ourselves covered over, as it were, with mud, spiritual mud, as it were, and we begin to think we want other things, and we begin to be attracted to other things, but that is not true to our true essence, and that creates a certain tension, which creates a certain unhappiness. So that is an important perspective, and this will explain to us exactly the danger that I referred to at the beginning, as seen in the next section of the Parsha. The next section of the Parsha says something very strange. when you come into the land, and you will see all of the abominable practices of the Canaanites, of the idolaters, all of the horrible, cruel, and shocking human sacrifice kinds of things that they do, and you'll see that. And you will perhaps desire, there may be somebody among you who will desire to follow in their ways. What? Who would want to follow in their ways after they see how horrible it is? Not just that, they know the punishment that these people are going to get is extinction, is they're going to be wiped out. And so they see that these idolaters, these pagans who do all of these horrible things, they get terrible punishment. So who in their right mind would want to emulate that, to be like that? Seems very strange. Yet the Torah says there will be people who will look and they'll say, I want to do that. The great Rabbi Dr. Abraham Twersky points out that this is very solid psychology. That when a person sees something that's very attractive to them, they see the pagans doing their rituals, they see the pagans seemingly enjoying their rituals, they see them living a carefree, as it were, life. It's not a carefree life at all, it just may seem that way. It's very seductive to them and they want to do that. But the punishment? What about the punishment? Aren't people afraid of the punishment? Just like the unfaithful wife who, when she's proven unfaithful in the temple with the ceremony, when she drinks the special concoction and she has a very ugly and horrific end. So the next chapter of the Torah talks about the Nazir, the one who chooses to take an oath that they're going to abstain from wine, they're going to abstain from haircuts and from becoming impure to the dead. And the rabbis say that one who sees what happens to this unfaithful woman, this sotah, has to therefore stay away from wine. So again, the commentaries ask, wait a second, the guy who saw what happened to the sotah is probably the last one who needs to stay away from wine because he already is convinced this is a bad way. He saw what happened to her. He saw the horrific thing that happened to her. He says, I don't want... And yet he's the one who's more susceptible, so therefore he's the one who has to stop from drinking wine? The answer is yes. Says Dr. Twersky, when a person sees something, they want it. But what about the punishment? And here comes the thing that is the most dangerous. We love it in the study hall, but we don't love it in our lives. And that is what we say in Hebrew, terutzim. Terutzim are, it's more than answers. It's solutions. When Tosafot asks a question on the Gemara, we look for terutz, for a solution, for an answer. But we don't look for, the best translation of it in day-to-day life is excuses. We don't want excuses. Because excuses are basically saying, I know my behavior is bad, but I'm going to avoid punishment because I have an excuse. And the Torah itself, in our section, where it says when they see the abominations of these idol worshippers and these pagans and all of the horrible things they do, the person says, Shalom Yeli, I will have peace, ki b'shrirut li Vayelech, I will go with the corruption of my heart. In other words, the person has excuses and says, I want what they're doing, and as for punishment, I'm not afraid because I have an excuse. What's my excuse? Anything from the song Dear Officer Krupke. My upbringing was bad, I had bad social experiences, I'm too poor, I have to do something, otherwise I'm going to be depressed, I'm going to commit suicide, I'm going to this, I'm going to that. My neighborhood is influencing me, I can't help it, and so forth and so on. A person makes 101 excuses as to why they're not going to get punished. And once they make an excuse, so then there's nothing stopping them from any destructive behavior. And the Torah continues, God will not forgive the person who makes excuses because they are rationalizing this evil behavior. And the ultimate result is the destruction of that person and the destruction of the land as that person then influences those around him or her. So therefore we see that the most dangerous thing are excuses. And now that brings us to our first question. Why does the Torah say that if the Torah was in heaven, that you should say, who shall go up to heaven and get it for us? And the rabbis say that means that if it would be in heaven, you'd have to go up and get it. Why give a theoretical that's pure hyperbole? The answer is, you know what the Torah is telling you? The Torah is telling you that nothing is beyond your ability. God changed us so that we, in our essence, want to, and not just want to, are capable of observing all of the commandments, of living lives of complete devotion to God. And God would not command us something that we're not capable of doing. So therefore, when the Torah says that if it would be in the heavens to say who shall go up to the heavens and get it for us, the Torah is telling us that if it would be in the heavens, you don't have an excuse. Because if it would be in the heavens, you would reach to get it and you would discover that you have grown wings. God would have made you capable of doing it because God knows that whatever he commands us, we are capable of doing. And if we don't, it's only because we have made an excuse. So the shofar blasts through those excuses because excuses involve logic and thinking and explaining. The shofar doesn't do any of that. The shofar goes straight into the heart. Says the famous prayer that when the shofar gadol is heard, kol dimama daka, a small, simple voice is heard. And that's the small, simple voice of faith, of our covenant with Hashem, of the fact that Hashem belongs to us and we belong to Hashem, and there is no greater riches or blessing that is capable in the world. So as we come into this high holiday season, let us identify where we are making excuses and realize that we are capable of far better, and let us all be uplifted in the coming season of holidays. Shavua Tov.